The morning sun painted the horizon in shades of gold and crimson. Flight 247, bound from New York to London, climbed smoothly through the soft clouds. Inside, the hum of the jet engines was like a lullaby. Calm, steady, endless. Businessmen flipped through newspapers. A young mother rocked her baby to sleep. And in seat 14A, a woman with short brown hair, a gray hoodie, and headphones stared quietly out the window. Her name was Emma Collins. To everyone else, she was just another quiet passenger, maybe tired, maybe introverted. No one knew the story hiding behind those calm, observant eyes. In the cockpit, Captain Richard Richardson, a seasoned pilot with over 20 years of flying experience, glanced at the control panel. Everything was perfect. His co-pilot, Mark Hughes, leaned back, sipping coffee. "Smooth day for a long flight," Mark said with a grin. Richard chuckled. "Let's hope it stays that way." It didn't. 2 hours later, somewhere above the Atlantic Ocean, turbulence began to rattle the aircraft. Nothing serious, just the usual bumps. The seatbelt sign flicked on and passengers adjusted in their seats. But inside the cockpit, something changed. Captain Richardson's hand trembled slightly. His vision blurred. Sweat trickled down his temple. "Mark, I don't feel so—" Before he could finish, his eyes rolled back and his body slumped forward, hitting the control column. The plane dipped sharply. "Captain," Mark shouted, grabbing the yoke to level it. Panic surged through his veins. The autopilot disengaged with a sharp beep, beep, beep. Warning lights flashed red across the dashboard. "Mayday, mayday." Mark tried to send out a distress call, but the turbulence disrupted the radio. He turned to the cabin crew through the intercom. "Flight attendants to cockpit immediately." In the cabin, passengers screamed as the plane jolted. Oxygen masks dangled for a moment before retracting again. The baby cried. Coffee spilled. And everyone looked around in a confused, scared. Emma looked up. Her heartbeat steady. She unbuckled her seatbelt, her eyes scanning every movement. The flight attendants ran past her toward the cockpit. Inside, chaos. The captain was unconscious. The co-pilot was sweating, his hands shaking. "Do we have a doctor on board?" The head flight attendant shouted into the cabin. A man stood. "I'm a paramedic." He rushed in and began checking the captain's pulse. "He's breathing, but his heart rate is dropping fast," he said grimly. Mark cursed under his breath. "We're losing altitude. I can't stabilize the plane without help. The autopilot won't engage." The flight attendant's voice echoed through the PA system, trembling. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your crew speaking. Please remain seated and calm. We are experiencing a medical emergency. If there is any certified pilot on board, please come to the cockpit immediately." A heavy silence followed. People looked at one another. No one moved, until Emma slowly stood up. Her steps were steady, but her hands were clenched tightly. A passenger whispered, "Where is she going?" Another muttered, "Maybe she knows something." Emma walked toward the cockpit. The flight attendant stopped her. "Ma'am, please sit down. I heard the announcement," Emma said firmly. "I can help." The attendant looked her up and down. Jeans, hoodie, nothing official looking. "Are you a pilot?" Emma paused for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, I used to be." When she entered the cockpit, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The alarm kept beeping. "Altitude, 29,000 feet and falling." Mark glanced back. "Who are you?" "Emma Collins," she replied, sliding into the co-pilot's seat. Her voice was calm but commanding. "What's the status?" "Captain's down. Autopilot's off. We're dropping altitude. I'm trying to correct pitch." Emma scanned the control panel. Her fingers moved like muscle memory. "Hydraulics check. Engine 2 stable. Trim's off, I'll adjust." Within seconds, she trimmed the elevators manually and corrected the roll. The aircraft steadied. Mark's eyes widened. "How did you—" "Later," she interrupted. "Just keep your eyes on the instruments." In the cabin, passengers could feel the difference. The violent shaking calmed. The crying faded into whispers. Emma's hands glided across the controls with confidence, as if she had been doing this her whole life, and she had. Once the plane stabilized, Mark turned to her. "Thank God you were here. Where did you learn to fly?" Emma hesitated. "Military training. Long time ago." Before Mark could ask more, a sharp crackle came from the radio. "Flight 247, this is NORAD control. You've deviated from your flight path. Identify yourself." Mark reached for the mic, but Emma stopped him. She looked out the cockpit window. Far in the distance, two F-22 Raptors had appeared, their silver bodies glinting in the sunlight. Her pupils dilated, memories flooded back. The roar of jet engines, the blinding light of a crash, and a radio voice screaming her call sign before static swallowed it all. "Identify yourself immediately or we will intercept," the voice repeated. Mark panicked. What do we tell them? Emma slowly picked up the microphone. Her hand trembled for the first time. She took a deep breath. "This is civilian Flight 247 pilot incapacitated. I'm assuming temporary control." There was a pause on the other end. "State your name and authorization," Mark whispered. "Say anything." But Emma's lips moved before she could stop herself. "This is Falcon 01. The radio went dead silent. Mark stared at her. "What did you just say?" Outside, one of the F-22s wobbled slightly, as if the pilot inside had just heard a ghost. On the other end, in a NORAD control room deep underground, officers froze. A commander stood up from his chair. "Repeat that call sign." The radio crackled again. Emma's voice, soft yet steady. "Falcon 01. The commander turned to his aide. "Impossible," he whispered. "That call sign was retired 3 years ago." Back on the plane, the passengers still had no idea what was unfolding above them. They only knew that the plane had stopped falling, and that a mysterious woman now sat where the captain should have been. A flight attendant peeked in. "Ma'am, the passengers want to know what's happening." Emma didn't look away from the instruments. "Tell them everything's under control." But deep inside, she knew it wasn't. The left engine pressure was dropping, the navigation system flickered, and weather radar showed a storm ahead. Mark wiped sweat from his forehead. "We'll need to divert. Closest landing strip is in Nova Scotia." Emma nodded. "Set course to 045 degrees. Maintain 30,000 until we cross the front." Her voice had changed. Professional, calm, and precise. It was the tone of a pilot who'd faced death before. As the flight continued, Mark couldn't hold his curiosity anymore. "Falcon 01, he said quietly. "That's an Air Force call sign, isn't it?" Emma didn't answer. She just stared ahead. 3 years ago, Mark continued, a pilot with that call sign vanished during an operation in the North Atlantic. Her jet went down. They never found her. Emma finally turned her head, eyes cold, distant. Maybe she didn't want to be found. The co-pilot fell silent. The hum of the engines filled the space again. Down below, clouds rolled like waves. Above them, the two F-22s maintained formation, protecting the commercial jet without breaking radio silence. In that quiet moment, Emma's reflection glimmered faintly in the glass, a face burdened by memories, loss in something deeper, guilt. Hours earlier, she'd boarded Flight 247 under a different name, trying to disappear forever. Now fate had dragged her back into the sky, back into the same seat she thought she'd left behind. The irony wasn't lost on her. A woman who had sworn never to fly again was now holding 200 lives in her hands. Suddenly a sharp beep echoed. The weather radar lit up red. A storm system had formed directly ahead, massive, fast, and unavoidable. Mark looked nervous. "We should turn back," Emma shook her head. "Too late. If we turn, we'll stall. We go through it." "Through it? Are you insane?" Emma's jaw tightened. "Trust me, I've flown worse." She pushed the throttles forward, and the engines roared louder. Outside, lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the wings. The passengers gasped as turbulence struck again. Harder this time. The plane rattled like a leaf in the wind. Emma gritted her teeth. "Hold steady," Mark shouted over the noise. "We're losing altitude. 28,000, 27,000. Emma fought the controls, her arms straining. "I said hold steady." For a moment it felt like the sky itself was tearing apart. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the turbulence stopped. The plane broke through the top of the storm into brilliant sunlight. Silence. The passengers exhaled. Some began to cry. Others applauded softly, unaware of how close they'd come to disaster. In the cockpit, Mark sat back, exhausted. "You just flew through hell." Emma allowed herself a small, tired smile. "It's not my first time." But before she could relax, the radio crackled again. "Falcon 01. This is Eagle 2. Confirm your status." Emma froze. That voice, and she knew it. It was Captain Mason, her old squadron leader. The man who'd watched her jet disappear off radar 3 years ago. Her hand hovered over the mic. She wanted to reply, to say she was alive, but she couldn't. Not yet. Not when she didn't know if she could land this plane safely. Mark noticed her trembling. "You okay?" Emma nodded, lying. "I'm fine." She looked out the window again, the world below calm and endless. But inside, her heart was racing. She wasn't just flying a commercial jet anymore, she was facing her past. And somewhere deep down she knew this was only the beginning. Dark clouds loomed ahead like a wall of smoke and lightning. The Atlantic Ocean shimmered below. Cold, endless, merciless. Flight 247 was still airborne, but barely. Inside the cockpit, Emma Collins stared straight ahead, her face lit by the soft glow of the instruments. The engines groaned under pressure. The fuel indicators blinked amber. The co-pilot, Mark Hughes, sat beside her, pale and sweating. He finally broke the silence. "Emma, whoever you really are, you can't hide it anymore. Those fighter jets outside, they know you." Emma didn't answer. She just watched as the F-22 Raptors held formation on either side, their silver wings slicing through the clouds. A voice crackled through the radio. "Falcon 01, this is Eagle 2. Confirm your status." The name, Falcon 01, echoed through the cockpit like a ghost from another life. Emma closed her eyes for a moment. She could still remember the last time she heard that voice. The sound of alarms, flames, and a desperate "eject, eject," as her jet spiraled down into the ocean. Back then, she hadn't ejected. She had stayed with the aircraft to save her squadron from an exploding payload. Everyone thought she died that night, but somehow she survived, broken, lost, and tired of war. And now, here she was, flying again. "Falcon 01, do you copy?" the voice repeated. Emma finally lifted the radio. Her voice was calm, but it trembled faintly with emotion. "This is Falcon 01. I copy." There was silence. Then the voice on the other end, soft, disbelieving, said, "Emma? Is that really you?" It was Captain Mason, her former commander, the man who had carried her name on his flight helmet ever since she disappeared. "Mason," she whispered, We thought you were gone," he interrupted. "Where the hell have you been?" Emma smiled faintly, trying to live like a normal person. "Not working out too well, is it?" he said. For the first time since the flight began, Emma laughed, just a little. But her laugh faded when the fuel light began to blink red. Mark pointed at the display. "Fuel leak on engine 2. We'll lose it in 20 minutes. Emma nodded grimly. "Divert to the nearest runway." "Already tried. Halifax is 300 miles out. Too far. We won't make it." Mason's voice cut through. "Falcon, listen to me. There's an old NATO airstrip 120 miles northeast. Coordinates incoming." Emma entered the coordinates manually. Her hands moved fast, steady, pure instinct. "Got it," she said. "Course set." The F-22s shifted formation, moving ahead to scout the path through the storm. Their vapor trails shimmered like streaks of silver lightning. Mark looked at Emma. "You really were one of them, weren't you?" Emma didn't look back. "I still am." As they neared the storm, the plane shook violently. Lightning forked across the sky, illuminating Emma's face, calm, focused, fearless. "Altitude 25,000 and dropping," Mark called out. "Keep it steady," Emma said. "We ride this down gently." Suddenly, an explosion sounded from the left wing. Passengers screamed. The cabin lights flickered. "Engine 2 just died," Mark shouted. The aircraft yawed left, losing balance. Emma grabbed the control yoke, muscles straining. Counter rudder 15 degrees right. The plane steadied slightly, but only just. In the cabin, people were praying, crying, holding hands. The flight attendants struggled to keep order. And through all the chaos, a little girl in seat 22B looked out the window at the fighter jets escorting them, and smiled. "Mommy," she whispered. "They're protecting us." Her mother nodded, tears streaming down her face. Back in the cockpit, Mason's voice came again. "You're losing altitude too fast. You won't clear the ridge unless you climb." "Can't," Emma replied. "Not with one engine down." "Then you need to glide it in." Emma's lips tightened. "Copy that." She knew what that meant. No power, minimal control. But she also knew she could do it. She'd done it before, 3 years ago. Only that time she hadn't made it out alive. Mark's voice cracked. "We're out of time, Emma." She looked at him, eyes steady, voice quiet. "Then let's make it count." She adjusted the flaps manually. The nose of the aircraft lifted slightly. Wind screamed against the fuselage. The lights in the cabin dimmed. Only the glow of the instruments remained. "Passengers will feel a drop," she warned. "Brace for descent." She grabbed the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Emma Collins, temporarily in control of Flight 247. We are making an emergency landing. Please stay calm, secure your seatbelts, and trust me." Her voice was strong. It carried across the cabin like a promise. Down below, the NATO airstrip came into view, a long, narrow stretch of concrete surrounded by forest and mist. "Runway visual," Mark said. "We're too high." Emma adjusted pitch. "Deploying flaps, gear down." The plane shuddered as the landing gear extended. Wind gusts battered the wings. "Speed 180 knots, Mark called. "Too fast," Emma muttered. "Come on, girl, hold together." The plane dipped, closer, closer, 1,000 feet, 100,000, 300. The runway lights gleamed through the rain. Emma whispered, "Come on, just a little more." The wheels hit the ground with a thunderous screech. The aircraft bounced, then slammed down again. Emma reversed thrust manually. The right engine screamed, the left one dead. The smell of burning rubber filled the cabin. Sparks flew as the plane slowed. 200 knots, 100, 60, 20. And then, silence. They had stopped on the ground. Alive. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the cabin erupted into applause, tears, and disbelief. People hugged strangers. Some knelt to pray. Mark leaned back in his seat, laughing shakily. "You did it. You actually did it." Emma's hands trembled for the first time. "We did it." The emergency crews rushed in. The cockpit door opened. Flashing lights bathed the interior in red and blue. Emma stood, exhaustion washing over her. When she stepped out of the aircraft, rain kissed her face. On the tarmac, 2 F-22 pilots stood waiting, helmets off. Captain Mason was among them. He walked toward her slowly. Neither spoke for several seconds. Then he smiled, the kind of smile that carried both pride and pain. "The Falcon has landed," he said quietly. Emma laughed softly, tears mingling with the rain. "Didn't think I'd ever hear that again." Mason saluted her. She hesitated, then returned it, crisp and perfect. The watching crowd of passengers fell silent as they realized what they were witnessing, a soldier long presumed dead standing alive before them. Reporters later called it the miracle at 30,000 feet. News anchors praised the mystery woman who took control when everyone else froze. But among the pilots who heard her call sign that day, there was no mystery. They knew exactly who she was. Falcon 01, the lost pilot who had once vanished saving her squadron, and now saved 200 strangers in the same skies that once tried to take her. Days later, Emma stood at a small airfield outside London. She looked up as an F-22 roared overhead, Mason flying it one last time. He spoke to her through her earpiece. "You sure you don't want to come back?" Emma smiled. "I've already come back, just not the same way." He laughed. "The sky still misses you." "Then let it," she said. "It's someone else's turn to fly." She watched the jet disappear into the clouds. For the first time in years, her heart felt light. That night, alone in her apartment, she opened an old box. Inside was her flight patch, Falcon 01. She traced the letters with her thumb, whispering, "I never stopped flying." Just needed to find where I belonged. Outside her window, thunder rolled, distant, soft, almost like applause from the heavens. And as she looked up at the stars, Emma Collins, the quiet passenger, the forgotten pilot, the hero above the clouds, smiled, because somewhere out there, at 30,000 feet, the sky still remembered her name.